Hello, 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 hello. Hello, you guys. I'm still getting ready. Give me just a minute. I have like these weird moments where I'll be on my period and I'll bleed really heavy for one day, and then the next day it's gone, and then it'll come back the next day, and it's just like this on, day off pattern that's so annoying. So right now I'm experiencing a little bit of cramps, feeling a little bit annoyed. How's everybody's day? Whew, I've been busy. Like, it's been busy. It was weird because December and January were literally so slow. Like, some days I was only getting up and doing one dog. And yeah, there were times where I had more than one dog, but a lot of days, January and December, that's all I was getting was 1 to 2 dogs a day. So I was kind of depressed, like, what's going on? And now all of a sudden, February has hit. Today I did 6 dogs. Tomorrow I'm doing 5. Yesterday I did 5. Like, it's busy. December sales were down 30%, which is a lot. 30% is a lot. And then in January, sales were down another 7% from that 30%. So down a total of 37% in total for January and December. And this month already, I'm above that sales revenue. So I'm sitting at 78% more this month so far in the first few days than I was at both the first few days of January and December. It was really, really slow both months. And I know a lot of my clients have kids. So I feel like a lot of parents were spending, hey, Buffy, you finally made it. I feel like a lot of my clients were spending money on making sure that their kids had Christmases and that sort of thing. And then in January, they're like recovering from the money that they spent on Christmas and can't really get their dogs done. So I did still make money, but I definitely like being down 30% is a lot. That's a lot of revenue that you're missing out on. So, say for instance, just throwing it out there, say for instance, if my average month is $10,000, if I'm down 30%, that means I'm making $3,000 less than what I normally make. And that's a significant number to drop, you know? So I am very, very proud to see that already in the first 5 days that I'm making 78% more than I did the first 5 days of January and December. Woohoo! That's progress, you guys, because I was really sweating it out there for a minute. Hey, Shorty Pie! So I'm really proud. Because I hate having to feel like I need to ask people for money. You know, like that sucks. Nobody wants to have to feel like they need to ask people for money. And I got home and I made Chipotle chicken Alfredo. It's a recipe that I found on TikTok. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be fun if I did like if I did like a series of showing you guys how to cook my favorite recipes that I've found on TikTok. I think that that would be fun, right? Just throwing some ideas out there for like content and stuff. I wouldn't even know how to proceed to film myself cooking, but hey, Rudy Duke. But if that is something that you guys are interested in, I would love to do a series on all of my favorite recipes that I found on TikTok. I have a ton of them. And I go back to like several staples that I really love. The Chipotle chicken Alfredo is bomb, bomb. Like every single time I make it, even though I feel like it's a little spicy, my kids are always like more spice, more spice, more spice. Give it more kick. So every single time I'm adding more of that Chipotle chili powder onto it, and this time I think I did pretty good because my nose was watering at one bite of the chicken. So Shorty Pie, what are you talking about? Okay. Hey Bayou Bell, thank you for the gift. Okay. So if you have not been keeping up with what I've been doing, I have been reading the book by Shari Frank called The House of My Mother. And we've already gone through part 1 on Monday, part 2 yesterday, and today I don't think we're going to get through the entire part 3 because there's a lot of chapters in part 3. We might be able to get through chapter 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. And then I think we'll save the other half for tomorrow. So tonight we're doing chapter 25 through 30. And at the end of part 2, that's when she started going into how Jody Hildebrandt came into their family. She was talking about her little brother Chad having a lot of behavioral issues, and that was, I think, the initial reason why Ruby came and contacted Jody. Yeah, oh yeah, I hate that. I hate having to ask people for money. And the weird thing about asking people for money is that I really don't have anyone to ask. So for me, it would have to be like me asking either my kid's father or my ex-husband. And like I don't want to ask either one of them. Now, I don't mind asking my children's father because, like, my kids are here full time. So he can help me with, like, food and groceries and electric bill and that kind of stuff. But if it's for anything else, like I don't really have anybody to ask because I've cut ties with my entire family. So it's me and my 2 kids and that's it. So I don't have like a huge support system outside of the online community that I've built. Like you guys are it and my kids. Like that's all I have. And I appreciate every single one of you. But that would be like me coming online and being like, "Hey, Shorty Pie, can I borrow $1,000?" Like it's weird. It's weird. Yes, I would love it if my videos did more, in revenue because then I wouldn't have to ask and I could just, supplement my income based off of views and that sort of thing. And we're getting there. We're getting there. Thank you so much. It's me, Paula. We're getting there. It's just taking a little bit of time. It's just taking a little bit of time. Hey, Rebecca. Oh my gosh, it's been so long since you've been here. Paula, thank you so much for liking the live. All right. So if you missed part one and part two, I'm so glad you're here. If you missed part one and part two, you can go to my YT channel and you can click on the 8 passengers playlist, and the videos, the lives that I have done are going to be under that playlist. And I've tried to do a better job this time of not like stopping in the middle of the book and giving commentary. So you'll be able to listen to the book a little bit more, with a flow to it, rather than like when I was reading Gypsy's book, I cut in a lot to break down some of the contradictions and things. Whereas with this book, I don't know if there are any contradictions. I did not do any research prior. Oh, you've got to tell me about that Ruby FRanke recording, because I want to see that too. Okay, so we're on part 3, and this is The Conjurer, chapter 16, A Snake in the Garden. I want you guys to be able to see my face, so let me move just slightly so you can. Can y'all see my face pretty well? Okay. It was during that Orlando trip that Ruby, at her wit's end, sought advice from a family friend on what to do. The friend perked up. "Oh, I know just the person," she chirped, explaining that she had been attending workshops in Jody Hildebrandt's life coaching program, Connections. "Jody seemed to command a lot of respect," said the friend. "Maybe she'd be a good therapist for Chad, given his spirited nature." Jody Hildebrandt, Ruby repeated, testing the name on her tongue. It sounded official, important, like someone who could wrangle a herd of wild teenagers with just a stern glance. A licensed clinical mental health counselor, Jody had built a reputation in Utah's LDS community as something of a miracle worker. Her Connections program promised to help people overcome everything from corn addiction to distorted thinking, and she preached a philosophy based on 3 core principles: impeccable honesty, rigorous personal responsibility, and vulnerable humility. Intrigued by the idea of turning Chad from Dennis the Menace into an LDS poster child, Ruby immediately set up a Zoom call for Chad and Jody. This high stakes video conference took place in our hotel room in Orlando, so she did not even wait to leave Orlando before she called Jody. So this must have been a pretty serious situation where Ruby was feeling like, we've got to get somebody on the line right away. Hey, Marilyn. Hey, Barbara. We've got to get somebody on the line right away in order to get this kid under control. Sorry, I've got like... Okay. It was like skin sticking out. Thank you so much for the gift, Marilyn. After the initial call, Jody... Oh, no. I skipped. Where Chad had been grounded for the remainder of the trip. After the initial call, Jody reported back to Ruby, expressing confidence in her ability to make progress with Chad. "If my parents committed to weekly one-on-one calls between him and Jody." Oh, and she had some other ideas for his immediate rehabilitation, including sending him away to Anasazi, a wilderness therapy program in Arizona for troubled teens. I wonder if this is the same like troubled kids teen place that like Paris Hilton went to. Jody painted Anasazi as a transformative experience, a place where Chad could shed his rebellious ways and emerge as the obedient, spiritually aligned son my parents craved. It sounded like a miracle cure, promising to fix every conceivable teenage problem with a bit of fresh air and wilderness survival skills. Never mind the eye watering price tag of $13,945 for just 49 days of treatment. But my parents, flush with YouTube money and blinded by desperation, didn't even blink at the cost. They were too entranced by Jody's promises and too eager for a quick fix to question whether this was really in Chad's best interest. Whatever you say, said Ruby, desperate for a solution and thrilled to be collaborating in Project Chad with this supposed guru of self help. I looked up Jody online, and something about her rhetoric made me feel uneasy. Even her photo was off putting. Her gaze, sharp and efficient, her smile seemed severe, unyielding. In retrospect, though, it wasn't just her physical appearance that unsettled me. It was the complete absence of any nurturing energy, that warm, comforting aura one might normally expect from someone who has supposedly dedicated their life to helping others heal. Instead, in her messaging and her appearance, she seemed oddly smug. Later, I dig deeper into Jody's backstory, much of which she herself has shared openly in various media. Although it's hard to believe anything she says she was the sixth of seven kids, born to a fighter pilot dad and a stay at home mom. The motto was, "You're a Hildeprint, go hard or go home," according to Jody. Her mom lost a baby boy and was emotionally distant and didn't spend much time with her. Jody said her dad, while also emotionally closed off, taught her to work hard and not trust people. Oh, yeah. I did counseling with my first husband through the church, and it was free. Although when you do counseling in the church, they really want you to submit, especially if you're a wife and you're in a Christian relationship. Like, they want you to submit to your husband. So having your own like opinions, thoughts, emotions is not really something that they're interested in you having. They want you to submit to your husband and kind of throw everything else to the wayside. Hey, Amelia. Okay, so where was I at? Growing up in the desert, Jody says she found she was more comfortable around animals than humans, milking the family goats and enjoying her time alone. Having grown up with very little affection, she admitted finding the sight of tenderness between parents and children disturbing. Did you hear that? She admitted finding the sight of tenderness between parents and children disturbing. Like, you're supposed to show your kids some affection. Having grown up, oh, sorry, I already read that. Jody has publicly shared stories of being SA'd by a 15-year-old neighbor when she was 2 to 5, and again by a 16-year-old who lived with them when she was 7 to 9. She said that at age 21, she finally told a counselor about the ABUSE. And in 1999, when she was 26, Jody's ex-husband filed for divorce. Jody got full custody of her children, who were 9 and 7 at the time. And in her books, she admitted finding it hard managing her energetic young kids. So she started her journey as a healer in 2003, becoming a licensed clinical mental health counselor under the Utah Division of Professional Licensing in July of 2005. Guided by heavenly instruction and inspired invitation, she devised her specialized coaching program meant to foster the thing that she had never had growing up: connection, hence Connections, the name of the place that she funded. Always putting on a show. What troubled me most was how quickly my mother seemed willing to entrust Chad's fate to this virtual stranger, ready to ship him off to a wilderness camp based on Jody's advice alone. I couldn't shake the feeling that we might be trading one set of problems for another. The day Chad left for Anasazi was raining. The sky a heavy gray blanket that matched the weight in my chest. I watched as he stuffed a trash bag full of clothes, his shoulders slumped. He caught my eye, and for a second I saw a flash of the old Chad, that mischievous sparkle, that huge grin. Then he was gone, swallowed by the gloomy morning. True to form, Ruby and Kevin couldn't resist recording a video to explain their decision. They painted Chad as some kind of juvenile delinquent in desperate need of an attitude overhaul. Kevin uncharacteristically took the lead, his voice stern as he laid out the situation. I could almost see Ruby's puppet strings controlling his words. Then Ruby took center stage. Chad needs to develop some very basic maturity and skills, she declared. This is a chance for a reset, a fresh beginning. The idea with wilderness therapy is if you can survive with these peers in the wilderness with nothing more than the clothes on your back and a couple of field supplies, then there is nothing in the world that you can't tackle. Ruby's excitement bordered on the manic. It's like the real wilderness out there, she enthused, eyes gleaming. There are snakes, bears, coyotes, cougars. It's the real deal. We want Chad to have some of those experiences. I think Close Encounters would be good for him because those type of experiences can teach you what's really important. And he'll come home and he'll be like, dude, I survived and there were bears. I can do anything. Beneath her forced levity, the underlying message was clear. This was another punishment, a way to break Chad down and rebuild him into their idea of the perfect obedient son. Thank you, Holly. It's so good to see you. I'm glad you're here. No one can fix anybody, Ruby continued, oblivious to the irony. A person must choose if they're going to make changes in their life. And so I think this experience will reveal Chad and everyone else who's out there themselves, and they can learn to be better themselves or just stay in the mud. As Ruby spouted this nonsense, I watched Kevin nodding along at all the right moments. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of doubt perhaps. He'd later claim he'd disagree at the time before eventually falling in line. In the moment, though, he was the perfect supportive husband backing up his wife's delusions. Those days after Chad left were a blur of confusion and frustration. Ruby, in her infinite wisdom, decided we needed daily challenges to keep us connected while he was off playing Boy Scout Extreme. I remember rolling my eyes at most of them, but one in particular stands out in my memory. We were supposed to look into our own eyes and write about our light, whatever that meant, and how to make it grow. I went along with it, if only to avoid an argument. After all, arguing would probably lead me being sent to the desert too, and I can sunburn pretty easily. I remember standing in front of the bathroom mirror trying to do this ridiculous exercise, but instead of seeing my inner light or whatever, all I could focus on were my imperfections. It was like a dermatologist's nightmare come to life. My skin was dry and flaking. I was some sort of human croissant. There was a stubborn zit on my chin trying to form in its own sovereign nation, and that one thick hair by my mole seemed to grow back overnight no matter how many times I plucked it. I missed my brother so much. How these stupid daily tasks were supposed to somehow make up for his absence, I had no idea. Everything felt off balance. like we were in a clown car with one less clown. That little, hey Shiloh, that little reference to the clown car, I just want to also point out that Gypsy made a mention of a clown car in her book as well. Just some things to think about. And staring at my oily T-zone in the mirror was hardly going to make it feel any better. When Chad returned from Anasazi 3 months later, he talked about his time in the wilderness like it was no big deal, as if he just popped out for a quick nature walk rather than being exiled to the desert for a quarter of a year. He said it was fun in the end, being in nature with a bunch of kids. More freedom than he had at home. No vlogging responsibilities, building fires, seeing snakes, sleeping underneath the stars. It does sound kind of nice. But my parents weren't done with Chad yet, not by a long shot. Oh no, they'd already decided to hire Jody at great expense to embark on a series of one-on-one therapy sessions for Chad. This to me was concerning, perhaps even more so than camp, especially because the more I Googled Jody Hildebrandt, the more concerned I became. It felt like falling down a rabbit hole lined with red flags. Hey, Kathleen. Thanks for coming, Shiloh. Thanks for coming, Kathleen. For instance, in 2012, a young man moved to Utah with his new wife and baby to attend Brigham Young University. His bishop recommended he see Jody for therapy. This turned out to be a terrible mistake. Without any proof, Jody accused her client of being an ABUSEER and violated patient confidentiality by reporting him to BYU's Honor Code office as a SA predator. She also reported him to the church. The fallout was brutal. The man was kicked out of BYU and the church. His marriage fell apart. The very thing he'd gone to Jody for help with. Jody's therapist license was suspended in 2012 as a result. But for her client, the damage was already done. And here she was, still practicing, still wielding influence. It was as if she'd viewed her suspension as a sabbatical, used it to double down on her questionable methods. Feeling like we were boarding a train headed straight for Crazy Town, I pulled Chad aside for a sister-brother talk. We sat together in the basement, and I let it all spill out. Jody's not cool, I said bluntly. Like, she's bonkers. You should see this stuff online. She's practically a con artist. Chad shrugged, annoyingly unperturbed, like I just told him we were out of milk. Chill, Shari. I can handle her. She's just like all the others. All you have to do is agree with what they say. No, I think this is a big mistake. Chad raised an eyebrow. She's just some middle-aged lady. If I don't do therapy with her, Mom's going to make my life worse than it already is. Just be careful, okay? They say she tears families apart. Don't let her get into your head. I won't. Listen, I survived the desert. I can survive Jody Hildebrandt. Chad thanked me for my concern. Then, in typical baby brother fashion, he went straight to Ruby and told her what I said. A few days later, Ruby pulled me aside, fire in her eyes. How dare you sabotage your brother's progress, she hissed. He's getting help. And honestly, Shari, you could probably use some help too. I want to stop. Why was it so okay for Chad to get therapy, but not okay for Shari? Like, I don't understand that. I'm sitting here confused why she literally pulled Shari out of therapy, saying she was too well, and Chad isn't. Is it because he was being more defiant and Shari was more, quiet and depressed, that she didn't think that that was the problem? I think they both could have benefited from therapy. I stared at her, shaking my head. I don't need help from Jody. Yes, you do. You don't like Jody. Anyone who doesn't like Jody is hiding something. It means you're threatened by the truth she speaks. Ruby nodded sagely, as if she'd just imparted the wisdom of ages. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But, Mom, she had her license suspended. Her own kids don't even speak to her. Her kids couldn't handle the truth. She's been called by God to help people. Ruby's eyes gleamed with the fervor of a true believer. She was sold on Jody, hook, line, and sinker. Oh, that's crazy. Okay, the cult of connections. My first car was a hand me down from Kevin, a 2016 Ford Focus in pristine white. Every morning, as I slid into the driver's seat to head to school, I felt a small thrill of freedom. With the radio humming softly and the world rushing by outside the windows, I could breathe, think, and just be myself without any prying eyes or expectations. It represented the first real taste of adulthood, of making my own decisions and charting my own course. Sure, that course was mainly between home and school, with the occasional rebellious detour to the drive through, but still freedom. Like many aspects of my life, this newfound freedom came with a caveat. The car's title remained in Kevin's name, a detail that nagged in the back of my mind. In those quiet moments behind the wheel, I couldn't help but wonder, can Ruby swoop in one day and take this small piece of independence away from me? The lack of legal proof that the car was truly mine was always a source of anxiety, a reminder that my autonomy was still very tenuous and hinged on Ruby's unpredictable moods, which were about as stable as a Jenga tower in an earthquake. I think that's exactly what was happening, Shiloh. I think that Ruby was internalizing and Chad was externalizing. And because he was putting more of a external show of defiance and objectivity, that's why they perceived him as more of a threat than Ruby, because she wasn't outwardly being disrespectful, defiant, disobedient, and loud and obnoxious. They had certainly been some strange shifts in her behavior now that she was so obsessed with connections. One day, Ruby and Kevin went to a connections conference, and when Kevin came back, he seemed stressed. He wasn't sure he liked the community and would later say he felt like he was being surrounded by a bunch of man hating women. Still, a lot of people who he respected were a part of connections at this point, so he ignored his doubts. Besides, Ruby seemed so enraptured by Jody and her philosophy, he dared not burst her balloon. It was easier to go along with it than to risk becoming the next target of Jody's truth seeking missiles. But that was the beginning of the end for them. Ruby became more and more involved with connections, diving into Jody's concept of truth and distortions, two innocuous sounding words that would soon become the bane of my existence. The program was an expensive as it was extensive. The 6 week team leadership training, which included 6 90-minute sessions with a certified connections trainer and access to Jody's ever growing library of more than 100 podcasts, came with a hefty price tag of $49.95 per person. So almost $5,000 per person. For those truly committed to Jody's philosophy, or perhaps those she deemed of more intensive help, There was the 18-week company leadership training costing almost $15,000. It seemed Jody believed in the old adage, if you're going to fleece someone, might as well go for the whole sheep. The fruits of her labor were evident in her $5 million luxury home Ivins, a picturesque town 4 hours south. Complete with a pool and a safe room, it stood as a gleaming testament to how lucrative the business of fixing people could be, and just how persuasive Jody was at reeling in disciples and indoctrinating them. Jody's playbook focused on isolation and control. To fully embrace her teachings, connection students were urged to distance themselves from anyone not living by Jody's truth. It was like watching a real life invasion of the body snatchers, observing my parents' saintly circle the drain as they morphed into Jody's devoted disciples. At first, I hesitated to use the word cult. It seemed extreme. But as I delved into some casual online research, nothing says normal teenager quite like Googling is my family in a cult. Connections ticked all the boxes. Sure, we weren't being physically relocated to some remote compound a la Jonestown, but we didn't need to be. Our dedicated enclave within Utah was the perfect setup for someone like Jody, a ready-made, isolated community ripe for manipulation. Jody's followers were compelled to confess their distortions in group sessions and through constant phone calls with one another. Her little army informing on one another, recruiting anybody who'd listen. The key to connection, paradoxically, was disconnection. Isolating yourself from anyone who didn't speak Jody's language, making yourself totally dependent on your new connections family, who would police your every thought until you existed in a hive mind of groupthink. At the heart of it all was Jody, running the show with an iron fist. To those outside her inner circle, she was a respected pillar of the community, a beacon of hope for those seeking healing. Through sheer force of personality, she had positioned herself as the ultimate life coach, seemingly preying on LDS people who had started out simply wanting some coping skills, new ways to heal and look at the world. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a rigid script and tyrannical system designed to strip them of their autonomy while Jody monetized their so-called healing. Ruby's descent into Jody's world hit warp speed when she took the 6 week life coaching training course. Suddenly, she wasn't just drinking the Kool-Aid, she was brewing it. On Saturdays, I'd watch her hang on Jody's every Zoom broadcasted word like she was the second coming. The stars in my mom's eyes were blinding. Before long, Ruby had become a certified connections life coach, leading support calls and women's groups. Client confidentiality became a joke as she reported weekly to Jody. Big sister was here. One night at dinner, mom casually mentioned that a woman in her support group had been cheating. The offense? Noticing the mailman was attractive. In connections, warped reality, this constituted infidelity. Jody's teachings were extreme. A married man talking to a female coworker could be unfaithful, and glimpsing attractive people online might be classified as corn addiction. Only absolute purity of the thought was acceptable. In Jody's rigid world, innocence was rare. Those deemed distorted, usually husbands, were told to abandon their families to work on themselves. Alone, Jody seemed to specialize in guiding wives to distance themselves from their husbands or kicking them out entirely. Connections language framed it as inviting him to leave, code for I'm going to make you isolate yourself from everyone you know except Jody. Shockingly, the husbands often just went along with it, fully convinced that it was in the best interest of their families. It was like watching lemmings jump off a cliff. This self imposed isolation was part of Jody's twisted rings of responsibility concept. If you were distorted, you'd be stripped of every responsibility except self improvement. No job, no community, no family, just you and Jody's teachings in a vacuum, solitary confinement, but you have to pay for the privilege, all in the name of healing. These separations typically lasted at least 6 months. The minimum time Jody deemed necessary to demonstrate genuine change. Her logic was that anyone could fake remorse and make short term adjustments. But sustaining change for half a year proved sincere transformation. Adults were essentially put on a probation in their relationships, expected to prove their worth to Jody to earn back the privilege of the family closeness. The 6 month rule also applied to kids, and any significant transgression could result in a half-year sentence of restricted privileges, increased scrutiny, and constant pressure to demonstrate change. It's interesting to compare Ruby's glacial approach to parenting with Jody's rigid philosophy. The two weren't just similar, they were symbiotic. Jody's connections doctrine wasn't so much a revelation to Ruby as it was a mirror, reflecting and magnifying the harsh worldview she'd always held. After all, Ruby has always doled out love like a miser with coins, making her affection contingent on a prolonged demonstration of good behavior. In her world, love wasn't a given, it was a prize to be earned through perfect conduct, a carrot dangled just out of reach to keep us constantly striving, constantly proving ourselves worthy. Another similarity in the books is the carrot dangled. Things to think about in the back of your mind. Just hold on to it. Connections wasn't introducing Ruby to a new way of thinking. It was giving her the vocabulary and pseudoscientific backing to justify what she'd been doing all along. Jody's system had simply slapped a fancy label on this extreme starvation diet and called it therapy. In the end, Connections didn't change Ruby's tactics. It just gave her a manual to refine them. Ruby didn't announce Jody's arrival on her newfound interest in connections with any fanfare on 8 passengers. Instead, the shift was subtle, a slow integration of new ideas and terminology into her existing content. It was as if she were testing the waters, gauging her audience reactions to this new philosophy. I remember noticing the change in her language first. Suddenly, truth became a buzzword in her videos and blog posts. She casually mentioned how she found this self help program that was revolutionizing her approach to parenting and life in general. It was presented as just another tool in her parenting arsenal, another piece of advice she was sharing with her followers. Ruby began promoting connections events to her audience, though she didn't immediately reveal the depth of her involvement. She'd mention upcoming conferences to encourage her followers to sign up for free Saturday classes. It was framed as an exciting opportunity for self improvement, a chance for her audience to access the same wisdom that was supposedly transforming our family life. She positioned it as an evolution, a natural step in her journey as mother and influencer. Her followers, already primed to trust her advice, began to show interest in these new ideas, even though they couldn't see how Connections was already starting to destroy our family. For instance, when Jody decided that Chad wasn't improving fast enough, she'd advise my parents to immediately pull him out of track and football, crushing all his teenage dreams. For Chad, Track and football were his lifeline, his ticket to a brighter future. He had won first place in the district 100-meter dash and also in the 200-meter dash. Coaches whispered about his potential, and the dream of a football or track scholarship seemed within reach. It was more than just a way to pay for college. It was Chad's chance to prove himself, to carve out an identity beyond the constraints of our family dysfunction. But with one nod from Ruby and Kevin, Jody's interference shattered all those dreams. How could Chad possibly commit to track and football when he couldn't even be fully responsible for himself? Nope. Chad would be barred from sports until he was fixed. That meant taking away the one thing that gave him purpose and joy. I stood in the doorway of Chad's room, watching him methodically pack away his football gear. Chad, I said softly, do you really have to do this? He looked at me and his eyes hollow. You know I do, Shari. Mom and Dad made it clear. Jody says. Who the hell cares what Jody says? I blurted out. Chad's lips quirked in a sad smile. Yeah, well, try telling that to Mom and Dad. As if on cue, Ruby's voice floated up from downstairs. Chad, Jody's on the phone. She wants to talk to you. I watched my brother's shoulders slump even further. He stood up, casting one last longing look at his gear before heading downstairs, like a condemned man walking to the gallows. This isn't right, I thought, my heart aching. In the world of competitive sports, especially at the high school level, timing is everything. You can't just pause your athletic career and expect to pick it up again years later without consequences. They effectively ruined his chances at the scholarships that he'd worked so hard for, all in the name of what? Even now, I struggle to understand the reasoning. I followed Chad down, hovering at the edge of the living room as he took the phone from Ruby. Her face was beaming, as if she were handing him a gift instead of a DEATH sentence for his dreams. Hello, Jody, Chad said, his voice flat. I couldn't hear Jody's words, but I could see their effect on my brother. With each passing moment, the light in his eyes dimmed a little more. Yep, I get it, he mumbled. I need to focus on being responsible for myself before I can be responsible to any team. I wanted to scream, don't you see what you're doing to him? Don't you understand what you're taking away? In that moment, I saw flashes of a future crumbling away. Chad scoring the winning touchdown, scouts clamoring to offer him scholarships, a path out and away from all this madness. All that now gone. And Chad handed the phone back to Ruby. Kevin clapped him on the shoulder. This is for the best, son. Jody knows what she's talking about. Chapter 18, Isolation Tactics. As I watched my family and so many others succumb to Jody's twisted dogma, I couldn't help but wonder, what on earth was the source of that woman's power? Why did this woman in her ugly khaki shorts and long sleeve shirts have such a hold on people? Was it the promise of absolute truth, her supreme self confidence that offered some illusion of certainty in a world that seemed to be unraveling at the seams? Or was it the way she enabled people's hatred of others on themselves? I noticed how Ruby was beginning to turn on her parents and siblings, confronting difficult memories of her past in ways she'd never dared before. Always the poster child for moving forward. She'd spent her life plastering over her childhood wounds with a veneer of perfection and daily phone calls to her mother. Her relationship with her mom bordered on codependency, a fact I'd always found unsettling given my own emotional distance from Ruby. But Jody's emphasis on ceaseless inventory and inner work cracked that carefully constructed facade. Suddenly, Ruby's wounded inner child emerged, raw and angry, recalling incidents that she'd long buried, sending shockwaves through the entire Griffiths clan. None of them had shown an interest in joining connections, despite Ruby's glowing reviews. Increasingly, though, Ruby felt that unless they embraced connections, healing would never be possible. This severing didn't manifest overnight. It took 2 or 3 years before Ruby would cut ties entirely with her family. And as I watched Ruby delete contact after contact from her phone, I couldn't help but wonder, was this healing? It was as if Jody had flipped a switch in Ruby's brain, turning familial love into contempt overnight. In the back of my mind, a terrifying thought took root. If Ruby could cut off the entire Griffiths family so easy, what would stop her doing the same to us? Would I wake up one day and find myself deleted from the iMessage thread? I wanted to support my mother, despite the complex emotions I harbored towards her. Perhaps it was because I could empathize with the experience of holding resentment against one's parents and grappling with unresolved childhood trauma. I instinctively understood the unaddressed pain often perpetuates cycles of hurt, passing from one generation to the next. I'd never thought about it before that even those who present a flawless facade to the world, like my mother, might be struggling with deep seated issues that remain hidden from view. How their polished exterior can serve as a mask, concealing the inner turmoil and unhealed wounds that continue to fester beneath the surface. Recognizing this for the first time, I did feel a sense of compassion for my mother, kinship even, acknowledging that her seemingly perfect demeanor and the darkness behind it might have had a lot to do with her own unresolved past. One evening, Ruby pulled me aside after dinner for a little talk. Shari, we're taking you out of track so you can focus on what's really important. Your personal development, my mother said. I was stunned. Track, the only sport I actually enjoyed, was being taken away from me. What would be next? Banning me from breathing? But why? I asked, desperately hoping this was just a really bad joke. You're not emotionally vulnerable with me, Ruby said. There's a wall between us. Imagine how it'll affect your husband in the future. You think any man wants to put up with that? A cold, shut down wife? I don't understand. Shari, you don't have empathy. You're not compassionate. As your parent, it is my job to help you fix your flaws before it's too late. That's why your father and I have decided to give you the gift of one-on-one sessions with Jody. My stomach dropped. Over my DEAD body was I letting that woman anywhere near my brain. I'd rather lobotomize myself with a spoon. Chad is making so much progress with her. Ruby continued, now it's your turn. I dug my nails into my palms, fighting the urge to scream. Instead, I just stayed silent, turned to stone. Maybe if I didn't move, they'd think I was a statue and leave me alone. Ruby's eyes flashed, sensing my anger. The choice is yours, Shari. You either do the one-on-one counseling with Jody, or we take away your car, your phone, and pull you out of school entirely. You decide. My jaw dropped. They couldn't be serious, but one look at my mom's face and I knew she absolutely was. She would quite happily derail my entire life in my senior year of high school in order to force me into therapy with her totally sus life coach. Who were these pod people masquerading as my parents? I fled to my room. Thank you for liking the live. I fled to my room, rage boiling beneath my skin. I opened up my laptop, my fingers trembling, and typed, how to emancipate yourself from your parents into the search bar. But as the results loaded, reality crashed down. Where would I go? What would I do? Who would I be? These questions echoed in my mind, each one a painful reminder of my puppet status. At 17, I was a prisoner of circumstance. No friends outside our community, no support system, no escape route. I wish I could have walked out that door and never came back, but the cold truth was I had nowhere to walk to. God, I know that feeling all too well. Chapter 19, Winning the Self Loathing Olympics. The following week, I got on my first one on one phone call with Jody Hildebrandt. I took the call while sitting in the corner of my closet. I wanted to make sure no one could hear what I said. So, Shari, Jody began, her tone matter of fact, let's dive right in. Our goal with these calls is to isolate and ultimately address the distorted thinking that is causing you to behave in a cold and entitled manner that is creating issues in the family. Can you tell me more about that from your perspective? I don't know, I said, already irritated. I try to be a really good person, but are you a good person? Yes, I think so. How do we even know for sure? Jody let the question hang in the air for a moment. Everyone has areas where they can grow, she said finally. Questioning yourself rigorously is a healthy start. It shows self awareness. I agree with that, I said truthfully. Actually, I question myself all the time. It's kind of a problem. But are you asking yourself the right questions, Shari? I don't think so. Otherwise, why would we be here? I listened to Jody explain how people engage in what she called logical fallacies, meaning the lies that we tell ourselves. She said, I might be lying to myself about being a good person, for instance, because it suited my distorted narrative. Then she explained how crucial, in order for us to get closer to the truth about ourselves, to identify every single way we were in distortion. In order to do that, we were going to embark on a new way of thinking, one involving radical self honesty and rigorous personal inventory. Fine, I said. I'm open to taking inventory. I think our time's up, isn't it? Yes, but before we hang up, I'd like to address something. Shari, I heard you had some disparaging things to say about me. Oh, crap. Blood rushed to my cheeks. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry about that. Don't be sorry. Be real. Fine. Yes, I had some concerns. I said, be honest, Shari. You were spreading gossip, lies, and rumors. Would you consider that to be compassionate behavior? Or do you prefer to blindly believe everything that you see on the internet? I mean, if it's the truth, I started feeling like I was walking into a verbal minefield. Oh, you're going to learn a lot about the truth, Shari. You'll love it. Chad does, and he's much better now, isn't he? Jody said brightly, shifting gears. He seems more respectful, I said quietly. And your mother doesn't shout as much as she used to, does she? It was true. Ruby didn't raise her voice as much as she used to since she'd been in connections. The question is, are you willing to do the same work to be a happier and more fulfilled person for your family, one day, your spouse? Sure, I am, I said, feeling like I just signed a deal with the DEVIL, or at least the DEVIL's life coach. Chapter 20. Dirty laundry. Weekly calls with Jody became a part of my routine, each session lasting about 50 minutes, a standard therapy hour, for which she charged my parents $175. Typically, our sessions were free-form conversation focused on analyzing my thoughts and experiences from the week before. She never ever talked about herself. Even though she'd been very open about her history in her books, she always remained guarded in her personal interactions with me, never hinting at any past trauma. She didn't invite inquiries into her personal life, and I never felt comfortable asking her about herself directly. The relationship she was cultivating didn't leave room for such personal exchanges. It was all about quietly asserting domination while encouraging me to open up about my flaws and self loathing, which I was happy to do. On our second call, Jody listened intently as I read from my list of distorted thinking episodes for that week. I was quite proud of my work, actually. Very thorough. And this is from Sherry's from Sherry's journal. Monday. Jumped to conclusions 3 times today. Thought in black and white about that hard test 7 times. Competed with Sarah and assumed I was better at math than she. Tuesday. Catastrophized about upcoming presentation 4 times. Overgeneralized my abilities based on one bad grade 2 times. Personalized professor's general criticism of class performance 3 times. Wednesday, engaged in should statements about my study habits 5 times, magnified importance of minor social faux pas at lunch 2 times, discounted positives and feedback on my essay draft three times, and so on. Jody sighed when I finished, her voice heavy with disappointment. Clearly, you have some serious issues with adulation, she said. I don't understand, I whimpered, frustrated. Adulation is when you think you're better than everybody else, Jody said. Denigration is the opposite. Most people lean towards one or the other, and it's clear to me you heavily lean towards adulating. But I thought, if anything, I tell them to self denigrate. But at your core, it's the opposite, Sherry. Jody informed me that for next week homework, I had to write down every instance of self adulation I indulged in, on top of all my other distorted thoughts. To my horror, there were quite a few. Yes, list number 2 was a real page turner, bullet point after damning evidence that I was, as Jody suspected, an insufferable smarty pants, a teacher's pet, a grammar snob. Monday, felt smug when I answered a question in class that no one else could. Silently congratulated myself for using whom correctly in a sentence. Thought I was better than others for reading a book above my grade level. Tuesday, felt superior for finishing the math test first. Privately judged classmates for their music taste. Believed I was more mature than my peers for enjoying documentaries. Wednesday, felt proud of my extensive vocabulary during a presentation. Thought I was special for understanding a complex scientific concept quickly. Silently criticized others' grammar mistakes in group chat, and so on. I'd always been so obsessed with microanalyzing myself, so in a twisted way, being forced to notice even more possible ways in which I was a terrible person was right up my alley. Before long, I was documenting and second guessing every single word that came out of my mouth. Working with Jody was like a dream come true for my inner mean girl. We'd been training for the self loathing Olympics for a while, but now it was finally showtime. And the best part, it was all framed as a healthy way of building self awareness, a noble pursuit of personal growth and enlightenment. And so each week I continue to write, to document every flaw, each failing, each moment of possible hubris, my pen a weapon turned inward. Okay, this is much better, Sherry, Jody said after 5 weeks in, her eyes scanning the pages of my meticulously documented mess ups. Now I'm going to teach you something very Sorry. Now I'm going to teach you a very important technique, a way to transmute the adulation and turn it into something useful. Okay, I said, my voice filled with eagerness that was surprising even to my own ears. Next time you identify your adulation, Sherry, I invite you to explore its opposite, Jody continued. Think of it as a balancing exercise. So I should self denigrate instead? Very good, Sherry. So let's say you assume you're going to ace a test because, of course, you think you're so very clever. Change the language in your mind. Flip it. Think to yourself, oh my gosh, I'm going to fail this test because I'm a very stupid little girl. Excuse me? Yes, I want you to imagine what it feels like to fail the test. Really inhabit that feeling. I hesitated, my stomach churly. Failing a test? Was she kidding? I had never done that in my life. It was outside everything I knew. Sherry, be humble. You are far less clever than you think you are. Now tell me how that feels. Be honest. I took a shaky breath and tried to imagine what it would feel like not understanding my favorite books. Confusion and frustration washed over me. Ugh, this sucks, I whispered. Good, what else? How do you feel? I thought about trying to navigate the world. Sorry. And Ruby's mercurial moods without the anchor of my mind, my imagination, my ability to compartmentalize and cleverly pretend like everything was okay. It had gotten me out of trouble so many times. If I didn't have that guile, that willy understanding, I'd be like Chad, facing punishment and reprimands every 5 minutes. I feel scared, I said, my cheeks burning, exposed. There it is, exclaimed Joni. You feel vulnerable. Vulnerability is what Shari Franke experiences when she realizes that she is not right about everything. And that, my dear, is what we call living in the truth. As much as my gut tried to rebel against her methods, my mind couldn't refute her logic. By telling myself I was less than I thought I was, I found myself literally drowning in emotional vulnerability. And wasn't that the whole point of therapy? Oh, of this therapy circus in the first place, to strip me down to my rawest, most vulnerable core so that my mom would finally approve of me. Jody's convoluted math seemed to add up. Self deprecation plus vulnerability equals truth. And who I was to question her infallible calculations. I'm going to tell Ruby we had a real breakthrough today, said Jody. I am so very proud of you, Sherry. Thank you, I said. And I'm so sorry for the things I said about you, Jody. I guess we shouldn't believe everything we see online. She chuckled. No, we shouldn't. She said, her voice dripping with satisfaction of a predator who knows she has finally caught her prey. That's the last chapter I'm going to read tonight because I said we were going to only go through 20. Let's see, what time is it? It's 8:02. Actually, I think we could probably do do this next chapter. It's only a few pages. Wait a minute. Yeah, I think it'd be okay to do this next chapter. All right, chapter 21, Jody says, like Ruby, Kevin, and Chad, I drank the Connections Kool-Aid, more like chugged it by the gallon. Within a few months of starting my one-on-one therapy sessions with Jody, I was a card-carrying, insufferable Connections convert, obsessed with analyzing every thought that crossed my mind, as well as every thought that crossed everyone else's mind, too. As you can imagine, I was a real joy to be around, and every interaction became an opportunity for me to showcase my newfound enlightenment. Oh, you think you did well on that test? That's just your adulation talking. Let's explore the opposite, shall we? How does it feel to imagine failing miserably? I could practically hear my friends' eyes rolling in the back of their heads as I launched into yet another lecture on the dangers of distorted thinking. But I couldn't help myself, couldn't resist the urge to correct their flawed perceptions, to show them the error of their ways now that I understood the truth. I managed to drive away most of my friends at school. Surprise, surprise. No one wanted to be around a preachy 17-year-old firebrand, a mini Jody obsessed with calling out every cognitive distortion. But hey, they're lost, right? They just couldn't handle my superior grasp of the human psyche. Watching them drift away along with their laughter and easy camaraderie, I sometimes wondered if the price of my enlightenment was worth it. Then I realized that losing all my friends was just a part of the process. It was a test to see how strong and dedicated to the truth I was, just like the widow had been dedicated to her faith. We must be willing to sacrifice for our beliefs, I told myself every time I alienated another friend. Anyway, unlike me, they're all going to hell. And so on, I soldiered on, my head held high, my mind brimming with Jody's teachings. I was a warrior ready to take on the world, one distorted thought at a time. I didn't need anyone's validation. I had Jody's approval, which meant I had Ruby's, and that was all that mattered. One day, a good friend and I were sitting on the worn wooden benches outside school, the sun beating down on us, when she turned to me, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. Sherry, I kissed three boys over the weekend, and I was telling Sarah about it, and she basically called me a WHORE. She said guiltily, "What do you think?" I couldn't believe my friend, since ninth grade, was expecting me to sympathize. As a fellow member of the LDS church, sworn to a vow of chastity before marriage, she was treading on thin ice. She is so damned, I thought. Sorry, guys. Yawn, yawn, yawn. Okay. And what was your motive for kissing all those people? I asked icily. She looked at me like I had sprouted horns. Motive? They were cute. Why does there need to be some deep reason? Her voice was rising with each word, attracting curious glances from nearby students. I gave her my best connections look, a perfect blend of condescension and pity, and placed a sympathetic hand on her shoulder as if I were a wise sage bestowing my profound insights upon a lowly peasant. As your friend, I must ask, what does a kiss actually mean to you? What part of your ego was it serving when you chose to share yourself in that way? She shrugged me off, her eyes narrowing. Sherry, why are you interrogating me? I'm just curious. You're judging. You're being mean. I thought you were my friend. Don't you remember when you were the one going around kissing boys? True growth comes from confronting our deepest flaws. Are you willing to do the work? Oh, get lost, Sherry. Who are you even anymore? Tears spilling down her cheeks, she got up and stormed off. A flicker of remorse stirred within me, a tiny voice whispering that maybe, just maybe, I had crossed a line. But that voice was quickly drowned out by the deafening roar of my own self righteousness, my unwavering conviction that I, wise Sherry, was mercilessly trying to guide the sweet poor lamb out of distortion and toward truth. I guess she just isn't ready, I thought. She'll thank me later. She didn't. In fact, she never spoke to me again. Even teachers weren't safe from my sanctimony. In English class, I decided to take it upon myself to shred the book we were reading, The Chosen by Shane Potok, a poignant and well written story about a friendship between two Jewish boys growing up in Brooklyn at the end of World War II. Personally, I felt ready for a more challenging text, something that would truly test my superior intellect. This feels a little babyish. I think we should be reading harder things, I announced to the teacher at the beginning of class. Behold, mortals, for Shari has spoken. My teacher raised an eyebrow. I think you'll find it has a lot to offer, Shari. It was nominated for some big awards. It's a very well respected text, not a children's book by any means. His gentle rebuke pricked my conscience, and I wondered if maybe I was being a bit of a pretentious jerk. But what did I know? Oh no, but what did he know? I was the one learning to dismantle distortion. Awards, respect, those were just societal constructs designed to keep us from the truth. What is it, Shari? Said the teacher, as if reading my disdainful thoughts. Go on, tell us what you think. I think you're engaging in emotional reasoning, letting your positive feelings about the chosen one cloud your judgment about its suitability for the class. I said, just because you personally find it poignant and well written does not mean it is the ideal choice from an objective educational standpoint. You're worshiping the should without rationally evaluating whether it truly meets students' needs, which means your thought process is distorted by unexamined assumptions and an overly adulatory view of the book's merits for this particular purpose. Boom, mic drop. Shari 1, teacher 0. He asked me if I was finished, which of course I wasn't finished. I was just getting started. My classmates could not believe my preachiness, their faces a mixture of confusion and annoyance. I could feel their silent pleas for me to just shut the hell up and let them learn in peace. My teacher, fortunately, seemed to think it was all quite funny. Ever considered going into law, Shari? He chuckled before telling us to turn to page 52. Actually, yes, I have, I muttered, flipping to the page, annoyed, my cheeks burning with a mixture of embarrassment and self satisfaction. How strange. Being someone who'd always felt so shy, but was now compelled to yell from the rooftops that she was the only one who truly understood the world. When I told Ruby about the incidents at school, she was thrilled. Wow, that was so truthful and loving of you to reflect that on your promiscuous friend, she said, pride in her eyes. So you don't think it was bad that I asked her what her motives were? No, that was a good question of you to ask, Shari. And how did she respond? Well, she kind of got upset. Can you see that's a reflection of her distortion? She wasn't comfortable with your questions, even though you were just reflecting truth. My sweet Shari, you're so brave and clever. I wasn't brave or clever. I was just riding high on my wave of self righteous connections zeal. That's what being in a CULT like connections feels like you're special and no one else understands the special knowledge that you have. It's addictive. My eyes were sharp and my tongue sharper as I sought out every imperfect distortion filled soul that crossed my path. In my eyes, I was a crusader for truth, a warrior for enlightenment, determined to expose the flaws and weaknesses of those around me. In other words, I was a mean, judgmental scold, but I couldn't see that. And I didn't care if I lost every friend I had, if it meant hearing praise fall from my mother's lips. I'm so proud of the woman you're becoming, she'd say, her words filling me up like a balloon. I drank in this new and hard-won approval like a flower turning toward the sun. My whole life, all I'd ever wanted was to be seen and truly appreciated by my mother. With Jody's teachings as my guide, it seemed as though now I was learning how to access all that love and acceptance I'd been craving for so long. Finally, Ruby liked me. Some days it almost felt like we were friends. Okay, we're going to stop there. We're on chapter 3, still in the third section. Part 4 is really long, so we'll probably have to split that up too. So tomorrow we'll get through 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, maybe 28. We'll figure it out. There's a total of 48 chapters, so I don't think we'll be done. Maybe. Hold on. Tomorrow's Thursday. So Thursday, Friday. Yeah, I don't think we'll be done until next week. There's no way we'll be able to read there's no way I'll be able to read all these chapters by Saturday. So I think it'll probably take us until Wednesday of next week. The book is good. I could see how it would be easy to get caught up in getting approval from somebody that you've been wanting approval from your entire life, and not really understanding like what it is that you're doing to get that approval. So I can totally see how even though like in the beginning she was a little resistant to going, that over time she started to actually like it, because she was being conditioned, you know, and she was getting all this praise from her mom. And for some of us, it's like that's all we've ever wanted, is to be praised by our mom, to say like, hey, you're doing a good job, keep up, you know, keep on keeping on, and that sort of thing. And it's very sad that a lot of us didn't get that. So I can see how important that was for her to get that approval from her mom. Right. You hear what I'm saying, Kathleen? It just sucks because some of us really did get approval from our parents in the way that we needed, but some of us didn't. Some of us still haven't. Like I'm going on 43 this year and I still haven't gotten it, which is one reason why I'm no contact, because it's like I can't keep trying and continuing to hurt myself in the process. The book is getting really good. I'm surprised, like I said before, I'm surprised that her mother was so quick to pull her out of like actual therapy, but then was fine for him to go to therapy, and then ended up putting her in that same connections kind of situation. But the way that she describes it as a CULT makes a lot of sense, because a lot of times you don't even realize that that's what's happening and that you're being conditioned into a CULT. I'm so sorry to hear that, Kathleen, but at least you finally got it. You got it. You got it. You got it. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow. I need to go. I got cramps. I need to go get some Tylenol and take a bath. I'll see y'all later.